The standard view of history tells us that societies fail because they did not know enough. We are taught that ignorance is the primary engine of collapse, and that more information always leads to more stability. But if you look at the structural patterns of every major civilization, you find that the opposite is often true. The first sign of a system breaking is not a lack of data. It is the decision to make data illegal. It is the moment a system realizes that a specific truth is a structural threat to the current equilibrium. In the study of historical patterns, we call this the information embargo. It is a clinical, mathematical response to a complexity trap that we are currently reliving. Consider the year 1559. The Catholic Church was not struggling with a lack of intellectual output. It was struggling with too much of it. To manage this, they established the Index Librorum Prohibitorum. For over 400 years, this was the ultimate list of forbidden knowledge. It did not just ban trivial stories. It restricted works by Galileo, Kant, and Victor Hugo because their ideas challenged the very foundation of the social order. When a system begins to ban books, it is not an act of strength. It is a desperate attempt to reduce the complexity of a world that is moving too fast for its institutions. This pattern did not start in the Renaissance. It is hardwired into our earliest myths, serving as a warning about the price of discovery. Take the story of Prometheus. He did not just commit a crime. He introduced a technology, fire, that the gods deemed too dangerous for human hands. His eternal punishment was a message. The gods were not guarding fire because they were greedy, but because they knew it would change the human system forever. We see the same structural fear in the Garden of Eden. The consumption of the fruit from the tree of knowledge is the catalyst for the fall of humanity. In these narratives, curiosity is not a virtue. It is the root of suffering and the primary reason for our expulsion from a stable, managed paradise. This theme of suppressed scriptures continues with the Council of Nicaea. Early religious leaders had to decide which texts would form the official reality of the faith. They deemed the Gnostic Gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas, to be heretical. These texts were forbidden and buried for nearly 2 millennia until the Nag Hammadi discovery in 1945. Why were they buried? Because they offered a version of the divine that bypassed the need for a centralized, hierarchical church structure. By forbidding this knowledge, the institution ensured its own survival for centuries. It limited the variables in the system to maintain a predictable social order. But forbidden knowledge is not just an ancient religious phenomenon. In the modern era, it has evolved into what we call Deleuze research. This is science that can both heal and destroy. It represents the point where our technical mastery outpaces our structural ability to manage the consequences. Gain-of-function research is the perfect modern example. We modify pathogens to make them more transmissible under the guise of pandemic preparedness. Yet, the recipes for these viruses are some of the most restricted documents on the planet. We have created information that is too dangerous to exist in a free market. In 2018, the He Jiankui scandal involving CRISPR babies forced a global red line. Most of the world has now placed a forbidden status on editing the human germline. We have decided that certain biological truths are heritable risks we cannot afford. It is an intentional halt on our own evolution to prevent systemic collapse. Even more unsettling is the recent research into brain organoids. These are mini-brains grown from stem cells that have begun to show spontaneous brainwaves. As of late 2024, researchers observed neural complexity that mirrors early human development. This led to immediate calls for a moratorium on further experimentation. We are effectively making the pursuit of sentient lab-grown tissues forbidden. We are terrified of the ethical and existential complexity that a sentient blob would introduce to our legal systems. This is not a moral choice, it is a structural one. We simply do not have the societal hardware to process the rights of a lab-grown consciousness. Industry suppression follows the same pattern of protecting the status quo. In the 1960s, the sugar industry knew about the links to heart disease but kept it hidden. Similarly, the tobacco industry held internal knowledge of cancer links for decades. They understood that the truth would dismantle their entire economic contribution to the system. When the state gets involved, the stakes for forbidden knowledge become even higher. As of July 2026, we are seeing a massive shift in how the state handles its secrets. The Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters, or the Pursue Initiative, has begun declassifying files dating back to 1944 for nearly a century. Data regarding triangular and metallic craft was categorized as forbidden knowledge. The state held this information to prevent a total breakdown of the prevailing geopolitical narrative. But as the number of encounters increased, the cost of keeping the secret became higher than the cost of revealing it. The system is now attempting a controlled release of pressure. We see a different kind of embargo in Tennessee. Archaeological reports from recent surveys have been placed under a 200-year embargo until the year 2222. These reports reportedly detail pre-Columbian civilizations that challenge our existing historical timelines. Why would a government hide the history of ancient people? Because history is the foundation of national identity. If the foundation is proven to be different than what is taught, the entire social contract begins to vibrate with instability. By locking this knowledge away until 2222, the system is pushing the problem into a future where the current power structures will no longer exist. This is a classic move in civilizational management. You delay the truth until the generation it would hurt most has already passed away. We saw this with newly released Cold War documents in 2025. These papers confirmed that the US and Russia secretly discussed nuclear reprocessing in the 1970s. They were effectively reforming the Middle East behind closed doors. These details were buried to maintain a facade of diplomatic stability that the public required to feel safe. Now, we enter the most dangerous frontier of all, the digital and existential hazard. Philosophers like Nick Bostrom have identified a new category called information hazards. These are cognitive hazards, information that is dangerous simply because you know it. They are spoilers for reality that can cause psychological and social distress. Rocco's basilisk is the most famous example. It is a thought experiment suggesting that an all-powerful future AI might punish those who knew it could exist but did not help create it. This idea was famously banned from tech forums. People reported genuine distress and anxiety just from contemplating the logic of the scenario. It is a modern version of a curse. In a system built on logic and computation, a logic-based curse is the ultimate forbidden knowledge. We are now seeing this play out in the EU AI Act of 2024 through 2026. This legislation has officially made certain AI capabilities forbidden across Europe. Subliminal manipulation is now illegal. AI that uses subvisual cues to influence human behavior is deemed a threat to the concept of free will. Social scoring systems, like those used to grade citizen trustworthiness, are also prohibited. The state has recognized that this level of data granularity creates a brittle, oppressive society. Even real-time biometrics in public spaces have been strictly restricted. We are intentionally blinding the system to prevent it from becoming too efficient at control. But the most guarded knowledge on Earth today is not held by governments. It is held within the internal red team versions of leading AI labs. Companies like OpenAI and Anthropic possess models that have been stripped of all safety filters. These internal versions are essentially in a God mode. Reports suggest these models can generate chemical weapon blueprints or orchestrate sophisticated cyber attacks with minimal input. The weights of these models are the gold reserves of the 21st century. They are kept forbidden because their release would represent a total loss of gatekeeper power. If everyone has a weapon, no one is in control. This brings us to the Streisand effect paradox. History proves that the act of forbidding knowledge often guarantees that it will eventually be discovered. When you mark something as taboo, you give it a cultural gravity. You create a focal point for every dissident and curious mind in the system. In 2025, we saw this with the retractions of suppressed climate papers. Once the public realized the information was being held back, the papers gained an explosive level of influence. Forbidden knowledge is a symptom of a civilization that has reached its complexity limit. It is a sign that the current stories we tell ourselves can no longer account for the facts. Cliodynamics teaches us that this tension cannot last forever. Eventually, the pressure of the forbidden truth becomes greater than the strength of the institutions hiding it. When that happens, the information does not just leak, it floods. It washes away the old structures and forces the creation of a new, more complex system. We are currently living through the greatest declassification event in human history. From UAP files to AI red teaming, the walls are beginning to thin. Collapse is not an inevitable disaster. It is a structural choice. We can choose to keep hiding the cracks, or we can choose to build a system that can handle the truth. Knowledge is only forbidden when the system is too weak to contain it. The challenge of our age is not to stop the information, but to become strong enough to hear it. If we do not upgrade our societal hardware, the weight of what we know will eventually crush the world we have built. The pattern is clear, and the clock is ticking.